Hello again, it's Rochelle with my readers on. We're going to talk about how to utilize our strategy for factoring on some factoring problems. So, wow, that is a mess that I drove there. But I want to point out my first step is always going to be to factor out the greatest common factor. So now, if I look at this problem, 7a, there is no greatest common factor. So I'm done with step one. I'm going to move on to step two, which is identify the number of terms, right? Step two is identifying the number of terms. Maybe I'll erase it from here. How many terms? So in this case, there are 3 terms. So what I would try and do is I would try and guess and check for a short bit. So I would go like this. I know that my first terms are going to be y. And then I would try and think of factors of 84. That's a little bit weird for me. So 4 times 21. So 4 and 21, I know wouldn't work. I know that 7 will go into this. So 84 divided by 7 is 12. And so then I would go, oh wait, 12 and 5? Nope, 12 and 7, silly. If I make this a minus, because it's a 12 and this a plus, I know that negative 12 plus 7 is going to give me negative 5. And I could, of course, multiply that to check my work. But again, seeing that 7 was a factor, that isn't obvious. So I may have moved right to the AC method right away. But it really involves doing this. I don't know why I erased that. So here, again, first step, always, 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 is to factor out the greatest common factor. And if I look here, I can factor out a 7 and a y. And typically, if there's a negative in the front, I want to factor that out too. And if I factor negative 7y out of here, I'm only going to be left with a y. And then this, negative 7 times negative 7 would give me 49, positive 49. And then I have my y already out there. Now, this isn't much of a polynomial. It's just a binomial. I can't factor that anymore. There's no squared terms. Because we're basically looking at things that have a degree of 2. We're not going to look at any other degree. So that one was pretty nice, pretty easy. Now, if we look at this, again, we want to factor out anything that is in common. Well, I can see, let's see here, is there anything in common? Well, 3 will go into 39 13 times, but 64 divided by 3 is 2. Nope, there's going to be a decimal there. So there's nothing in common. Now, this is a plus. Even if this had been 30, I don't know, let's make it 25. This would still not be factorable because of this plus sign. When there are 2 terms that are added together, a sum means they're added. They're not going to be factorable unless there's something I can factor out in common. And in this case, I can't. So this is really not factorable. If this had been a 36, then I could at least pull out a 2 or a 4 in this case. So this one, again, first step, factor out what's in common. And what is in common there? I think I can divide everything by a 3. And if I divide everything by a 3, I'll have w squared minus 11w plus 20. So I would choose to guess and check this. I wouldn't go straight to the AC method because you kind of use part of the AC method because my A value here again is 1. My C value is 20, so that would be 20. I want to think of factors of 20, but they need to add up to negative 11. So if I look at that, I don't think any of these, right? I need them both to be negative also, right? But if I make this w minus 4 and w minus 5, I'm going to have, if I check it, I'm going to have the right number here, but this is going to be minus 9w. This would be minus 12w. So realistically, I don't think I can factor beyond this point. If this had ended up being a 9 in the middle or a 12, then I could factor, but I can't factor any further. So just taking out the common factor is all I can do. Now we get to some uglier looking ones, just these last two. If I looked at these last two together, I would say this is definitely the easiest one because it is two terms and there's nothing in common, so nothing to factor out. So automatically, because this is a minus, I'm going to do this. And I'm going to try and think what squared will give me m squared. Well, I know that's m. And what squared will give me 25, or what's the square root of 25? That's 5. Oh, I wrote it 2, but I said 5. And p squared would just be a p. And don't forget, you can check your work by multiplying out. I like that this is 5 p.m. and 5 p.m., but they will cancel out. So now here, this one looks ugly because I notice I cannot divide anything by all three. They won't all go into 2. So that means there's no greatest common factor. So I would literally get my calculator out like I just did, and I'm going to do 24 times 15. That is, so I'm going to use the AC method. So I know that A is 24, C is negative 15, and so that's going to equal negative 360. Wow. So I need to come up with factors of negative 360 that will add to be negative 2. So going like this doesn't make a lot of sense to me, right? Because if no matter which one I make negative here, those are going to add to be really large numbers in absolute value anyway. This would be negative 359. This would be negative 178. So I might skip ahead. I don't know how far I'd skip, but I know that 6 would be 60. That still is not going to get me close when I subtract those two numbers. So 9 would be 40. 10 would be 36. So that's still not it. 12, I'm trying to do this in my head, would be 30. 15. I could do 14 or 15. So 15 is 24. Again, I'm looking, because I want these to add to be negative 2. I'm making the bigger number negative, and in my head, I'm adding them. You might need to add them on your calculator, but I still am not getting to negative 2. So I think I'm getting close, though. So maybe I can try 360 divided by 16, let's say, on my calculator. Well, that's not a number that works. So what about 360 divided by 18? Well, there we go. So 18 times 20 gives me 36. Now, if I make this a negative, then this will be plus, and I will get a negative 2. So in the AC method, if you don't remember, we take our first term and our last term and we leave it alone. We're going to rewrite our middle term using these two values and adding my variable to them. So I'm going to have 18x, that's a positive. And then this one's a negative, so I'm going to write minus 20x. So let me go ahead and erase this little part. So what I have in a box here, 18x minus 20x gives me the negative 2x. So it's like I've made my problem bigger. But the reason I made my problem bigger is that now I'm going to group these, and I'm going to factor by grouping. I'm going to group the first two. I'm going to use blue here. And the second two. Okay? So the first two, I'm going to find the greatest common factor, which I think is going to be 6x. And if I divide 6x here, I'm going to get 4x. And if I divide 6x here, I'm going to get 3. Very important in factor by grouping, I need to make sure I copy my sign down. So I'm going to factor out that minus or that negative. And then I see that I could divide both of these by 5. So if I take out a 5, negative 5 times what will give me negative 20x? That would be a positive 4x. What times negative 5 would give me a negative 15? That would be plus 3. And if I've done it right, these two parts of the term should be the same. So I'm going to factor it out. And then what's going to be left is a 6x and a minus 5. Of course, I could check my work by multiplying that out, but I feel pretty confident, so I'm not going to.